Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Todd Snively with me. Todd is an entrepreneur, and as I researched his story and got to know about it, something that I think you're going to be able to take away and also relate to is how in life things can be going really well, and all of a sudden they cannot be going well, but it's about how we respond to those adversity moments in where we get in life. So, Todd, thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, it's really my privilege. Thank you for having me here.
You betcha. So, talk a little bit about the family dynamic for you, Todd, and growing up, and maybe experiences or life lessons learned from parents at a young age.
When I grew up, we were poor, and I learned we were poor when, yeah, I'll give you a perfect example. We'd be in the
Yeah,
grocery store, and you know how you're in the checkout lane and you're surrounded eye level, you're like 5, 6 year old, you see all that candy and all of that good stuff. And I'm about to grab a candy bar, and my mom looks right down at me and says, "No, we're poor." And I'm looking at that and I'm like, it's 40 cents, mom.
yeah,
And one of the things you take away from an experience like that is not only trying to figure out what poor means, but
mm,
there's a value correlation there. I mean, that's kind
yeah,
of like somebody telling you you're not worth a 40-cent candy bar in a lot of ways. And so I didn't know what rich people were, people with money, because we certainly weren't there. And because you're not there, you're not surrounded by anybody like that. And
yeah,
so I grew up with this mindset that I just didn't deserve anything other than what I had. And, not to hammer on my parents too hard, but this programming is so important.
mm,
And I kept hearing things like, "Oh, be lucky that you have what you have."
yeah,
And so you get that just to settle type of mental attitude.
yeah,
And of course, back then, growing up in the 60s, 70s, it was the old go to school, study hard, get good grades. Maybe go to college if you're lucky, because we can't afford it. So you better get a scholarship or something, and then get that job for 40 years and let that pension take care of you. Well, I learned early in life I didn't want to go that route. And one of the most impactful things that had happened was when I was 12 years old, I got a job as a caddy
mm,
at a country club.
yeah,
Turned out, in retrospect, it was a really nice one. And I was caddying for these people that were different than me. I'm like, well, why can't we do this kind of country
mm,
club thing? But these
yeah,
people were just different. They just carried themselves different. They talked different. And it turned out, as far as my life was concerned, they were real different. I remember asking this one man. He's passed now. Most of the people I caddied for are dead, by the way. Malcolm S. Lowenstein III was the name on the bag tag. And there was no Google back then. You couldn't just Google someone's name. And I asked him one day, I said, "What do you do for a living?"
yeah,
In the nicest way, a 12, 13-year-old can do. And he said, "I'm a butcher." And I kind of said, "This doesn't make sense to me." And it wasn't until later on I discovered he wasn't a butcher. He owned like 20 meat processing factories across the country. But that's how he would respond to that question like that. But once I realized that I was actually caddying for people whose names were on buildings around
mm,
the city, I started to study them and ask them, as many questions as I could, and realized, wow, these people have money.
yeah,
And I think I'd like to get some money also. But I didn't know how to do that. And so, my reaction to starting that journey was I got to start somewhere.
mm,
And I just wanted to get out of the house. I thought it was a bit of a dysfunctional environment, period. And nobody supported me in anything I wanted to do. I wanted to take flying lessons ever since I looked up in the air and saw my first airplane go over. And so I went to my dad. I remember this distinctly. I was 14, about to turn 15. And I said, "I really want to take flying lessons." And he says, "It'll be really interesting seeing how you figure that one out, because we're poor."
yeah,
Like, that is
yeah,
this poor stuff again. And so I did what most kids in school do. I went to McDonald's and some other fast food restaurants, and I even went down to the local airport.
mm,
Now I was 15 at this time, and I said to them, I said, no, I'm sorry, yeah, no, I was 15, and I said, I'll do anything. I can do anything. I want to learn how to fly, and I need to figure out how to pay for these lessons. And they put me on the waiting list. And one day they called and said, if you're still interested, you can wash planes, you can fuel them up, you can do all the crappy tasks nobody wants to do, and we'll pay you. And I said, deal. And not only did I do that, but I went into a youth program. It was called Civil Air Patrol. And not a lot of people have heard about it. It's an actual auxiliary of the Air Force that does search and rescue, but they have a youth program.
Yeah.
And I was able to work towards and earn a scholarship for a 2-week solo encampment where they take you from scratch, train you in an airplane, actual flight lessons, ground school, the whole 9 yards, and then you get the opportunity to fly the plane by yourself if the flight instructor feels you're qualified. Well, my flight instructor said to me, "You're ready to solo." He said, "But I can't solo you." I said, "Why not?" He says, "You have to be 16." So this was like 3 weeks before my 16th birthday, and there was no bending that rule. He actually came down to where I was living 3 weeks later and soloed me on my birthday. Probably one of
Cool.
the best days I had in my whole life up to that point, because this was like a major
Yeah.
accomplishment. Not only that, but it made getting dates with hot chicks in high school super simple. Like, you want to go out with me tonight? I figure I'll take you flying over the city, and maybe we can fly into this restaurant. And they're like, "What? Excuse me?"
I love it. So
Yeah. So
talk a little bit about, having a goal, even from a young age, that you were so focused on that you were literally, willing to do kind of whatever it took, right? Hey, I went to multiple interviews, I got told no, but I still was just relentless in pursuit of something that would help me earn money so I could get these flying lessons.
I'll tell you one thing I learned right away is the group of people that I hung out with in the Civil Air Patrol were like-minded, had
Mm,
similar goals, and supported me.
yeah.
Nobody outside of that group supported me, thought I had a chance in heck of getting that license, making the nobody, not my
Wow.
parents, nobody. It was just like, when are you going to wake up and act responsible? Was
Mm,
generally the response I got. And so I kind of learned at that early age is, wow, you got to hang out with people that think like you do,
yeah.
because if you don't, it is an uphill battle. And getting toxic people out of your life, out of my life, was some of the best things that I was able to do
Yeah.
to be able to even attempt to reach a goal. To have somebody say, "I'm behind you. That's good. I hope you make it." Otherwise, it's the uphill battle.
That's awesome. So to talk about it, we have this love of flying, and so we're getting old enough where we're going to graduate from high school, and we decide, well, you know what? Maybe the Air Force is a spot to pursue after this. So talk a little bit about the decision to join the Air Force and some experiences learned there.
I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy because I wanted to be a fighter pilot. You know who Farrah Fawcett is? Remember her
Yeah.
famous poster? Well, I had that famous red bathing suit poster on the wall, but the bigger one I had right next to her was the F-15 Eagle. I wanted to be a fighter pilot in the worst way possible. So I applied to the Air Force Academy, which was very difficult because I didn't know any senators, and you have to have a senator nominate you. But I was able to get one, and I got the acceptance letter. It was one of the first times my dad really said that he was proud of me because he saw a
Mm,
physical accomplishment.
yeah.
But I thought about it, and I said, that's 4 years at the academy, which is no fun. And then I had to make a 6-year commitment to the Air Force after that. That's 10 years of my life. And I was still really uncertain about the whole thing. So I
Yeah.
told my dad, I said, "You know what?" I said, "I'm not ready to commit to 10 years. So instead of going to the academy, I'm going to enlist."
Mm,
And he went nuts, crazy nuts, not a good nuts, crazy nuts. And I got that same speech. We're poor. This is a scholarship. You don't know what you're turning down. You're stupid. Anyone would kill for this. I'm like, well, okay, well, I'm enlisting anyway. As a matter of fact, I was 17 at that time, and I went to the recruiter, and he said, "Well, we got to get your parents' permission." I said,
mm.
"It'll be easy. Show up at my house 7 o'clock tonight." And doorbell rang. I didn't tell him he was coming. I introduced him. He was in full uniform. And I quite simply said, "If you don't sign these forms to let me go in when I'm 17, I said, I'm never speaking to either one of you again. And I didn't figure I had anything to lose, you know. But they didn't hesitate. My dad said, whatever. You know, he could have, they just really, my mom was like, but my dad could have cared less. So they signed the forms that night. That was late, gosh, I want to say 1979. And I went to my principal of the high school. I wanted to graduate early so I could just get out of that house and get on my path.
Yeah.
And he allowed me to graduate early. And so I graduated all by myself. No pomp, no circumstance, no cap, no gown. And I had a few free months. And then I reported down to Texas. And that Air Force enlisted career, I spent about 2 years in it, was really good. I met some amazing people. And I decided, okay, I'm ready for the academy again. And luckily, they had 15 slots available every year for enlisted people in the Air Force. But here it is, 15 out of every enlisted person in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And I had to go through it again. So luckily, part of my job, every Friday morning around 6 in the morning, I went to, I knew he was a general. I wasn't exactly sure what kind of general he was because I was just a lowly airman at the time, a senior airman. And I would go into the basement of his home and do the preventive maintenance on his secure voice equipment. And when I came up the stairs to leave, this general's wife always made me breakfast every Friday morning. So she was super nice. She's reminded me more of my grandmother than my mom. But I'm eating the breakfast one day, and the general comes down the stairs. This has never happened before. I snap up to attention. He goes, "Oh, enjoy your breakfast. Sit down." He sat down, and she put a plate in front of him, and he started to ask me questions. And one of the questions is, what do you plan to do with a career in the Air Force? And I said, well, I'm actually applying to the Air Force Academy right now. I'm just trying to find an officer to give me a recommendation letter. And General Gabriel's wife didn't miss a beat. She said, "Oh, Charles, write the boy a letter." And he was all hemming and hawing. Well, it's not that easy. I don't even know them. I got to look at his file. So I was like choking on my toast, and I just wanted to get out of there at that point. And so I left. 2 weeks later, my first sergeant, who was one of the biggest, meanest, strongest guys you'd ever want to deal with, black belt in karate, bald head, deep voice, calls me into his office. And I'll take all the expletives out, but he basically wanted to know, what kind of trouble I'd gotten into. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, the colonel wants to see both of us." I'm like, "I don't have a clue." And so we walk into the colonel's office, my group commander, and he said, "Snively, how in the name of all things holy did you get a letter of recommendation from General Gabriel, who I come to find out is the commander-in-chief of all of the Air Force in Europe?
Wow.
Thank you, Safi was his title." And I said, "Well, his wife and I were having breakfast." He goes, wait a minute. How did you come to have breakfast with the general?" And anyway, the colonel ended up, he's in a position now, he had to write a better letter than the general wrote. So, so I got into the academy. And I was in a pilot slot, and everything was great for about a year and a half. And I lost my vision. I was just studying so hard, it fell outside the parameters of being able to be a pilot. And that was the worst day of my life at that point. I had lost all my motivation, all my reason for being there. And it was not easy being there.
Yeah.
I won't go into how difficult it is. It just wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But all of a sudden, I didn't want to be there anymore. And all I wanted to do was fly. So now my goal was to get out. I had served enough time. They let me out actually a few months early. But it was either that or I had to do another 6 years in the Air Force. So I decided to take the out, and I was going to figure out how to become a commercial pilot. So I had nowhere to go, so I had to go back to my dad's house. Him and mom had divorced by this point. They literally waited till all the kids were out of the house, which in my mind is stupid, but we don't have to talk about that. And and it was one of those things, you can't live under my roof unless you're paying rent, and I'm like, all right. So I became a bartender. And while I was bartending, which was a whole nother unique experience, I met this guy who offered me a job serving legal papers. And I had so much fun doing that, I decided to start my own company. So that was my very first business, was a legal services company serving these summons and complaints and garnishments and subpoenas and whatnot. Lots of interesting side stories there. But that was my first business. It grew into actually a licensed collection agency. and we were collecting judgments from attorneys. I had a chance to. So obviously I'm not pursuing my flying dream. I'm just trying to make the money to afford it because it's really expensive. And
Right.
again, nobody was going to help me but myself. So I made enough money, or actually, I got the business to the point where I was able to sell it and have just enough money to finish all of my certifications: commercial pilot, multi engine, instrument, flight instructor, yada, yada, yada. And I finally had it. I was ready to begin flying as a career. I spent a year or so doing the flight instruction and the commercial flying for charter, which was okay, but then my quote unquote big break came, and I got to fly a really nice airplane for under contract for the post office and UPS. Required me to move to Omaha, Nebraska, which was okay. Well, I really want to fly this plane, so I'm gonna go. And what literally happened over the course of a year that I was flying with them, it's pretty much what I call my only real job other than the Air Force. Um, they took something I loved and they just
Yeah.
beat the crap out of it. I had to fly. I was single pilot all at night, gone every other day, every other weekend, dodging thunderstorms, dodging tornadoes.
Hmm.
But the worst part was the first major engine failure.
Yeah.
And I actually had, in my whole career, I had four. But when I was flying for these guys, I had three in 90
Wow.
days. The
Wow.
first one, I look back on it, I'm still amazed I survived the first one. And matter of fact, I came to learn the very next day when one of the owners called me and said, the whole reason the position was open that you filled was because almost the exact same thing happened to a guy a year ago and he did not survive. I'm like,
Mm.
why didn't anybody tell me this, when I
Yeah.
applied?
Yeah. Would have been
but,
good to know earlier.
but one of the things that really changed my life was on the drive to the airport, because I was flying at night. So like 11 o'clock at night, I'm driving to the airport. I heard on the radio, one of these talk shows, that every single person has no less than 6 ideas a year that, if properly implemented, would make them a millionaire.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, I'm flying under contract for the post office. I'm making $26,000 a year. That's it. And I almost died.
Right.
So I listened to that and I said, is that true? I'm going to start listening to these little voices in my head because I've had them before, but I'm just like, no, you should just be happy with what you have. No, you don't
Mm.
deserve that. Well,
Yeah.
I thought they were good ideas, never implemented them. I said, oh, so the real trick is once you have the good idea, you're supposed to properly implement it.
Yes.
Maybe I'll try that. So I decided to start studying real estate. I knew a lot of people were making money. I knew nothing about real estate. Matter of fact, the very first house that we had purchased before going to Omaha and Colorado Springs, Colorado, I lost every nickel
Mm.
that we put into it when it came time to sell. And I didn't want that to happen again. So
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to get educated about real estate. But while I'm getting educated, while I'm reading, by the way, a lot of people may not know this. There's these things, they're called libraries, and they have books in them. And back then, that was the search engine. Okay, you had to go
Yeah.
into the library, open the book,
Yes.
and do your reading. And so, since I was gone every other day and every other weekend, I spent all my away time in the library reading about real estate. And what I discovered was, wow, not only do I know enough to not lose my butt on the next house that I buy for myself, I can actually make money
Mm.
doing this real estate purchasing, and there were so many different ways to do it. And so when I was away, I did the studying. When I was back in Omaha, I did the practice. And I went out
Mm.
and I looked at houses and I talked to sellers and I tried to make ridiculous deals just to practice in real life and get ingrained in me that, wow, I can really do this. And then the next thing that really changed my life was, I'd had the 3 engine failures in 90 days, a couple other emergencies, and then my brother died.
Wow.
And there's nothing like a death like that, someone that close to you, he was 2 years younger,
Mm.
to really make you, you do get really retrospective really fast
Yeah.
and introspective. And I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this flying experiment. I still want to fly for fun if I can ever recapture that again. But I have no money. I almost died. Now my brother's dead, which just tells you, you better seize the moment, right? So I went to my wife and I said, I think I can make money with this real estate and I want to try it. She
Mm.
said, well, how long do you think it'll be, before we're actually making some money? And I said, I don't know, a year or two. She goes, well, then let's go back to Michigan where her folks were at. And of course, my dad was there too. But she goes, so if it doesn't work out, we can live in my parents' basement or something. We have a
Yeah.
plan B. And so I arranged another flying job out of Detroit, actually Ypsilanti, near Detroit. And I was
Hmm.
going to be flying actually a much nicer airplane, still cargo. And so we pack everything up. We drive all the way to Michigan. I'm supposed to start. It was a Friday, I think, when we arrived. I was supposed to start my training on a Monday. So I call them, tell them I was there, ready to start training. And they go, okay, well, small change in plans. We're just going to base you out of Florida instead of Michigan. And I'm like, all my plans were based on being in Michigan.
Yeah.
And just at the spur of the moment, I don't know what happened in my brain, but I just said, I quit, and I hang up the phone. And my wife looks at me and she's like, oh, what just happened? And I'm like, something good, because we're going to try to make this real estate thing work a lot faster. So
Yes.
here I am, no job, no money, and we're going out looking for a place to live. Because literally at that time, those 3 days, we were in our parents' basement, and I knew, oh, that's not going to work. So with no job, no money, we were able to rent a town home, and both of us went to, I can't remember, I think it was Manpower. It was a temporary help agency.
Yeah.
And she walked in, we walked in together, and the lady asks her, what kind of skills do you have? And she was a really good keyboarder and everything. Well, we have a position, at this law firm for secretary.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it was, gosh, I think they were paying her $20 an hour. And she says, I'll take it.
Right. Yeah.
And they turned to me and said, what kind of skills do you have? I said, well, what's the best paying job, that you have? And they said, well, it's a different law firm, but it's for a certified paralegal. I says, oh yeah, I'm a certified paralegal. No, I wasn't.
But I
I,
learned.
s- I said, I'll do that job. That was like $32 an hour. And so what was really funny was the job. I don't think I ever did any paralegal work at all. It was basically transcribing dictation. And I was a
Mm.
really good keyboarder. I was maybe 120 words a minute back then. So I worked at that job. She worked like 30 floors below me at yeah, same tower. It was really wild, and a different law firm. And during the evenings and the weekends, I went out to look for real estate to purchase.
Hmm.
And I had maybe saved up like 3 grand. So I started to find these deals, but I bought 2 homes, 2 simple assumable mortgages, and my money was gone. Now I had to wait for the houses to cash flow. One day, so I got up to about 6 houses. And then one day I saw this huge ad in the newspaper. And again, now you're going to laugh at how naive I was back then. I was pretty naive. And it basically said, learn how to buy real estate with zero money down. And I said, this is perfect. I have zero money to
Yeah.
put down. I need this.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience with what's called the pitch from the stage.
Mm.
And the guy that did it was a master, Dr. Albert Lowry. And what was really cool about that was when they introduced him, I almost freaked out right in my chair because remember all those books I told you I was reading in the
Yeah.
library? I'd say 10 of them were written by this guy. So
Wow.
it was, to me, it was, just, the universe providing. And the problem was I had, I think, $750 roughly in the checking account, and he wanted $695 for his training program and the weekend workshop that was going to be held that weekend. And so I attended 3 times, heard the pitch 3 times, finally made the decision, which is so interesting because to actually go through that experience as a pitch virgin, and then look back on it now, all
Yes.
these years later, is just kind of surreal. But I actually took the program, and this program was actually, I don't know if the program was so good, but what it did was it started to fire off those voices in my head. And
Yes.
everything I looked at started to be an opportunity.
Mm.
And long story short, within 12 months, I had bought 97 single family homes in 3 apartment buildings with almost no money. It was
Wow.
all, yeah, it was crazy. So about a year later, when other opportunities were start to present themselves, I saw the same ad in the same paper, and I'm like, I got to go tell this guy, what he did for me. And so as soon as I walked in, I recognized him and I walked up to him and his wife. And I said, I just want to let you know, I was sitting in this ballroom a year ago. I'm at 97 single family homes, 3 apartment buildings, making, 5 figures a month. And I just want to thank you for everything. And he was like, can you stick around for a little bit and maybe say that, when I
Yeah.
call you up to the front of the room?
Yeah.
So I did that for him, and we actually became friends. And I learned a lot from this man. He's passed away, but we were friends for a long time. He
Yeah.
helped me learn about marketing the right way. He helped me really build my next business, which was amazing. And I learned the value then. Now, he never charged me a nickel. We ended up working together. We pitched from the stage a bunch of times. We helped each other synergistically, I think, make more money.
Yeah.
But that was when I actually realized the true value of getting that close with
Right.
somebody that has accomplished what you want to accomplish, and that you
Yeah.
can, in fact, a lot of times just pay your way to the top with the right people, right?
Yeah. So I want to
And
highlight,
that's
a little bit in your story and some of the things that transpired there. So you talked in the beginning about how, as a young child, boy growing up in the household, we didn't have enough money. I was told we were poor. And then you mentioned, at some point though, I just realized like that's not what I wanted. And I think for a lot of people, realizing it and making the jump to do something different is the problem, right? It's the
yes,
actionable step. A lot of people realize, hey, I don't want the same life as what I saw, or I don't want to end up in the same circumstance. But we just do the same things, and inevitably, 50 years down the road, you wind up in that spot. Whereas some people say, I don't want to end up there, and they make a choice that allows them to go in a different direction. So for you, as you reflect back on that, what was it? Was it the support of your wife? Was it the, you know, deep seated, maybe frustration of parents, or what was it that actually prompted you to make that choice to make the jump?
well, and I don't talk about this too much, but I was a lot more damaged than I
Mm,
thought I was, and
yeah.
this is why I have a lot of patience with people that um, that self sabotage,
Yeah.
because I was so damaged from all of that programming. You don't realize how damaged you are. So
Yeah.
you try to break out of it, but at the same time, in my specific case, um, I still never felt I deserved any of the success that I was finding. And I was always attributing these successes to dumb luck, that it
Yeah.
wasn't me, that I wasn't talented, that,
Yeah.
I still had all of this negativity. And in many, many, many cases, I did try to self sabotage, but so I still ended up being successful, which up until I was like 40 was a curse. Okay. It wasn't until I had a major, major crisis that I was able to hit a reset button in my brain and get rid of all that garbage. Some people will never have that opportunity. The
Yeah.
crisis just isn't big enough. If they're really as damaged as I was, it takes a mega crisis for you to
Mm,
totally bottom out, and then you have to figure out, oh, okay, I put myself here. I have
mm,
no one to blame but myself. How do I pick up the pieces and do it better the next time?
yeah.
So to your point, it wasn't a pure decision as much as it was. I don't even want to use the word game, but this is how I looked at life. I was
Mm,
poor and I had nothing, and I was going to be on my own. And if I lived until I was 75, I had to figure out how to take care of myself until I was 75. I
yeah.
was always running from a position of fear, which is not
Mm,
good. Okay,
yeah.
it's not good, because you'll do a lot of stupid stuff when
Yeah.
you're running from a position of fear. And it didn't matter. I had made my first $1 million, and I was still afraid I was going to lose it. But what was even worse is I was afraid I was going to lose it because of myself, not
Mm,
because of the recession or, anything else going on. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of things happen that were outside of my control that, yeah, it's just business stuff, right?
yeah.
They're just obstacles you have to go over, under, or around. So you get a lot of that just being in business. But I was adding to it. by
Yep.
just being broken. And so I never felt I deserved any of the success I was getting. So um, I honestly only got, I'm going to call it quasi support from my, which ended up being my ex-wife. My first wife was, it was kind of weird. She would tell me all the time that I wasn't really the person she wanted to marry.
Mm,
She wanted more of that guy that was going to work at the gas station 9 to 5, come home with a steady paychecks, go to church, 7 days a week, and spend all the spare time with the kids and the family. And when you're trying to build a business and trying to do something different, that's not the balance,
yeah.
right? And that's why that word balance, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to get the support of somebody that has the same definition of balance as you do.
Yep. Yep. That's good.
So
That's
even
good.
though I was having these successes and getting hooked up with the right people, it was for a long time. I still felt I didn't deserve it, but I
Yeah.
was taking it and I was just literally just doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing to
Yep.
move the business forward, to take advantage of other opportunities. And
Yeah.
despite myself in a lot of ways, I was very successful.
Yeah. Well, and I think, something that I'll highlight is kind of twofold. One, there were opportunities that presented themselves that you took advantage of and you were able to, hey, I went to this seminar. There was probably a million people that saw that ad and there was only 100 people that showed up, right? I mean, so there was something about you that took action. But then the second part is sometimes we'll have maybe wake up calls, but they're not enough for us, right? It takes some bigger cataclysmic event, and that is finally the wake up call that does make me realize, okay, maybe I need to answer this. And so I appreciate you highlighting that. And then the last part that I'd say is, I love how you just had mentioned having a sense of ownership. I think too many times we want to put the blame on somebody. And a firm belief in my life has always been that almost anything that happens in my life, I own some percentage of it, right? I may not own 100% of it all the time. It might not always be all my fault, but what percentage did I own? Was it 1%? Was it 20%? Is it 80% mine? But oftentimes, no matter what happens, there's a percentage that I need to own of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I've worked with thousands of people,
Yeah.
and the one thing that in common that all of them have is they say they want to start a business or have a better life or make more money, but when push comes to shove, they don't want it bad enough, right?
Yep.
They're not willing to. I mean, when people don't have money, and I mean, this myself included, when I didn't have money, I had to be willing to do things that I sure as heck wouldn't want to do if I had money, right?
Yes.
And and a lot of people, they don't have enough pain in their current
Mhm.
position, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I found myself pouring gasoline on the bridge behind me and throwing the lighter over my shoulder, I was properly motivated to move
Yeah.
forward. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But
No,
if you're
that's
not
good.
in that situation, when you're like, oh, I got a plan B and a plan C, and which is garbage, all right, all
Yep.
you need is a plan A and commit to it and move forward. Too many people will take a step forward and 3 steps backward and wonder why
Yep.
they never get anywhere. It's
That's really
maddening
good.
in some cases.
Oh, that's really good. So, Todd, as you are growing in the real estate sector, you continue to develop different businesses and talk a little bit about that and, the businesses in between that, and then where we're at today with the business you're running currently.
When I was making a lot of money in the real estate, I started to see the pain points to the level I had gotten,
Yeah.
and you know, I started to open my mind again to hear of other opportunities. One day I was laying in bed. It was probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and I think the Tonight Show had just finished or whatever, and this commercial came on, and it was one of those commercials. I don't know if anybody remembers these, but it's these pretty women in like their negligees saying, "Call this number, and I'll blow in your ear and talk to you in a certain way." And what I wasn't interested in that per se, but what I noticed was the number you were calling was a 900 number, and these 900 numbers had a per minute charge of like $5, $6 a minute. And the thought that was going through my mind, and this is how my mind worked, and still works to this day, who gets that $5? Where's
Yeah.
that money going?
Yeah.
Who's making the money and how is it happening? So the 900 number industry, which most people the young people, I don't know what the average age of your audience is. Most people have never heard of it.
Yeah.
And back in the day, the long distance companies had a product like they have an 800 number product, right? You can get an 800 number, you pay so much a minute for the traffic. And the 900 numbers were the same way. But what was different is the phone company would let you determine what to charge for the call, and they collected the money off the telephone bill, took their little piece, and then gave you the money.
Hmm.
And I thought about this and I said, this is genius. And the only people using it back when I discovered it was porn and psychics. Psychic
Yeah.
hotline, call 1-900 I can see in the future for
Yeah.
$25.99, we'll give you a reading. Anyway, I started to use it to sell information about products and then fulfill the products. For example, call 1-900 blah 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 and learn everything there's to know about this brand new fishing lure, why it works so well, why you're going to catch more fish, why it's the latest thing. And just for calling, the cost of the call is $24.99, we'll send you one of these lures absolutely free. And I have long stories about these different programs I
Yeah.
ran that were just blowing my mind. And that was the very first time I made $1 million, had $1 million cash sitting in my bank account, was
Yep.
because of the 900 number industry. Absolutely amazing. So I put together a marketing company. We became a service bureau. I went down every profit center I could see. And then eventually I put together what turned out to be my first training program, how to become financially independent using 900 telephone numbers. And
Yeah.
I went on the circuit and pitched from the stage. And at one point we brought enough people into our program and helped them create enough profitable programs that we were generating over 2.5 million minutes a month, that I
Wow.
was getting a nickel for every minute from these other people's traffic. And we ended up doing 1-900 charitable programs. I worked with Clint Eastwood and Robert Stack in the U.S. Marshall Foundation to raise
Yeah.
money for them. We developed the very first live attorney line, where 1-900-INFO law, you could call and for $5 a minute talk to an attorney, ask
Hmm.
questions, a real attorney. It was out of Huntington Beach, California. We did Ask a Nurse. We did all of these revolutionary programs that
Yeah.
nobody was doing. And the public loved them. Where else at that time could you pick up a phone and get to ask an attorney a question and not get a bill later on? It came on your phone bill.
Yeah.
So that industry changed, though. I have lots of stories. We had disasters happen,
Yep.
and basically, found myself in another situation where I had to make some decisions,
Yep.
and this was one. Remember how the last major decision I told you about, my brother had just died? Well, in this
Yeah.
case, it was a little happier. My first child was being born,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time, my wife was very active in the business. She was the de facto office manager, did a lot of things for the business. But she told me when she got pregnant, that she wasn't going to work anymore. She was never going to step foot back in that office. And I heard her say that, but my reaction was, no, you will. You'll come back. And
Yeah.
so I'm building out her office. I'm turning it into like a nursery attached to her office, and I'm just making it totally functional for a mother and a child. Now think
Right.
a lot of women are just like rolling their eyes right now, going, "What an idiot."
Yeah.
And it turns out, when Brittany was born, my first wife never walked back into that office again, ever.
Yeah.
That was July 1992. Well, in August of 92, that business basically failed due to mostly external factors, but I found a little self-sabotage in there too when I look back at it. And I'm sitting there, trying to figure out where to go from there when the phone rang, and it was a business broker. We actually had developed a patent on some pretty techie stuff that had to do with rerouting live calls, call redirect, using a PC board. And there was a company out of Japan that had been wanting to buy my business to have that tech for a
Yeah.
couple of years. And I kept saying no. Well, the business broker called again and said, well, they've upped their offer, and are you interested at all? And it was one of those surreal moments when I sat there and I said, yeah, I'm ready. I'll do it. And so that kind of had a better ending to it than it could have.
Yeah.
We got a chunk of change out of that. And I spent a few months just at home with my brand new daughter, and it was a really happy time, but I couldn't turn it off, and to this day I haven't been able to turn it off, and I don't think I'll ever turn it off. And I got another idea. It was actually my wife. We were watching movies. Well, we just rented something from Blockbuster, and she said, "Wow, we rent so many movies. We could probably buy a video store." And when the brain just starts working, and it goes, "You're probably right." And so the very next day, I went out and I started to look, and I found a rundown video store a few miles from our house. It was in a neighborhood. The guy had had it for years. He was ready to retire. He'd run it right into the ground. I bought it for next to nothing, and the very first thing I did was move it right next to the Blockbuster.
Hmm.
Everybody thought I was crazy. They go, "What are you doing? They're going to crush you like the cockroach you are." And I go, "No, I don't think so." And I entered into a special leasing deal where I could have as many copies of every new release in my store that I wanted, and I was paying on a per rental basis.
Hmm.
And Blockbuster couldn't do that. Everybody would walk into the Blockbuster. "You got the Top Gun?" No. They'd
Right.
walk right into our little store. "You got Top Gun?" "Yeah, there's 50 copies over there. Grab one." So that people ask me to this day, what was the most business you had the most fun with?
Yeah.
Actual visceral fun. It was that video store.
Yeah.
I loved that video store. And now that store only made me like 100 grand a year, but still to have a video store, make that kind of money and have that much fun. I had plenty of money in the bank from the exit I'd gotten from the other company. And I was still trying to figure out, well, what's my next big play? The video store is fun, but I knew video was not going to be around.
Yep.
Matter of fact, in the marketing business that I'd had, I actually flew to a presentation in Canada, Toronto. We went into a little room. The only thing there was a TV, and they turned it on, and a movie was playing. And we didn't see a DVR, we didn't see a video player, we didn't see a
Hmm.
cable box. We said, "What is this?" It was DirecTV. And I had the chance to buy effectively 1% of DirecTV for about $250,000 back then. And I passed.
That's amazing.
that that's a regret. But
Yeah.
I can't see that far into the
Right.
future. But this
Yep.
was they had one satellite up, and they
Wow.
were streaming a live movie, and I was like, "Yeah, good luck with this."
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that's
How wrong can
amazing.
one be?
Yeah, and there is
Oh.
so many forward-looking things. That's great. Well,
Um, After the video store,
yeah.
my dad, or not my dad, I'm sorry, my wife's dad uh, got sick with cancer. He was old. And my wife, she never really asked me for too much. And we were in Colorado Springs at the time. We'd gone back to Colorado. And she said, "Can we move back to Michigan at least till my dad passes? I don't know if it's 3 months or a year, but I want to be with him." I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So we moved back to Michigan, but I left the video store there. The big mistake I made with that was putting a 21-year-old kid in charge of a cat business. Okay,
Yeah.
enough said there.
Yep.
I'm wondering why every report I'm downloading out of the software looks like somebody going through a downhill ski slope. It just wasn't good.
Yeah.
But we're back in Michigan now. I couldn't find a location to move the store, so I literally just got on a plane one day, walked in. It was a Friday afternoon, and I said, "You're fired. Get out of here."
Oh,
And I ran the register, closed the store on a Sunday, liquidated it over a 2-week period, and went back to Michigan.
yeah.
Now, now I'm like, what am I going to do? So what I did was, I call this my fallback business. By the way, I don't know if I would fall back to it again, but I ended up falling back to this business like 3 different times, and it was where I would go purchase charged off credit card debt from Chemical Bank,
Yeah.
Citibank. We even did like student loans through certain universities. We would buy them for pennies on the dollar. They were all, they've been through collection agencies, collection
Yep.
attorneys, to get the letters and all that. And so this stuff was beaten down
Right.
pretty hard. But I'd still had my skills back from my very first business. And so I would buy the debt. It's now my debt. I was collecting it on my own, paying on an average a penny and a half on the dollar and collecting 38 cents on the dollar. So it was a good business.
Yeah.
But it's what I call a boring business. This is
Right.
not like my passion. It was just I got nothing else going on. This is a good
Yep.
idea. I think I know what I'm doing. And so you
Yeah.
just launch it and get going. But in the middle of that, I heard from one of my 900 number clients from back in the day. And he had ran one of the more successful programs, making lots of money with his program. I didn't really understand his program. It was a financial one. But he was making a lot of money. And he wanted to hire me he goes, I know you're out of the business. He goes, but I want to hire you as a marketing consultant on this next thing I want to launch. And I wasn't interested. I said, no, I don't want to do that. He goes, well, in order to thank you for all the help you've given me in the past, I'm going to send you a training program that I wrote. And I think it's perfect for you. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So this big thing shows up in the mail a few days later. I kind of ignored it. And then I was really bored at work one day. I said, well, let me see what this thing is. And you know what it was? It was a training program on how to trade commodities, how to trade future contracts. Yep. I didn't even know what a future contract was. But as I was reading and turning each page, I couldn't put it down. Yep. But you know what I was hearing in my head? This is what you were meant to do from day one. Wow. That's how close this resonated with me. Yeah. And whatever technical terms or learning there was within this program, I just sopped it right up. And I started to trade my own money out of the same office that we were doing the collections. I had set up a trading terminal and was getting my live quotes in, and I was doing my thing and getting taken advantage of by others and learning that way. But the worst thing that could have possibly happened to me, and I had enormous success. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And I say that because as soon as I'm getting all of this success and buying the flashy cars and yada, 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 people are asking, what are you doing? Even at cocktail parties, what do you do?
Yeah, right.
So I'm a futures trader. I'm a professional futures trader. I trade, my money and all that. And it wasn't very long before they're just throwing money at me. And so I started to trade other people's monies just in their own accounts. I think you could do that for 15 people without having to be licensed. And then it just started to grow, and I said, I need to get licensed, okay? So I went and I started to get all of these licenses. I started to form commodity pools. And again, the worst thing that could happen happened. I continued to be very successful. And at one point, we had something like $118 million under management. It was really amazing. I was learning a lot, but I was also learning it's a really sleazy industry. And I'm sure there's a lot of brokers. If any brokers are out there listening, they're either yelling at me or saying, yeah, you're kind of right. But anyway, do you remember Enron?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I got myself on the wrong end of a natural gas trade when Enron did its market manipulation and ended up losing millions. I mean, I lost pretty much all of my money.
Yeah.
And it was bad. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So I changed gears, went into a discount brokerage situation where I was just allowing other people to trade through my platform, but I didn't have the right license. So long story short, the government walked into my office one day and literally put me out of business. I mean, it was that fast. I was making maybe $2 million a month now with this new direction I had taken. But because I had taken this shortcut, that's it. There's like no second chances. And they just shut me down. That was February 2002. It was March 2003 when I started selling online. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 some odd years. But that last failure, and again, there's like a whole nother hour story, which I know we don't have time for, but that was the failure. That was when I hit the bottom. And I mean, that well, by the way, is pretty deep. Like I said, it would take me an hour to tell you about that well, but I got out of the well. And I finally realized that pretty much anything bad that had happened to me, I allowed to happen. I set myself up. Once I saw that, I lost a lot of anger. I was able to get on the right path. And, I've created just a massive amount of success since March 2002. But it wouldn't have happened. It would not have happened without that being at the bottom of it and being able to finally press that reset button on my life.
Yeah. Well, Todd, I love how you share in your story just the different successes you've had and just transparency about it, right? Hey, things were going well, and then inevitably something would change. And then things would start going well, and they would change. But the resilience factor, and I truly believe, that drive, from even way back when you're a young man, that drive of, hey, I want my life to be different than the life that I grew up in, just continues to, come through you today. And so I wish you nothing but continued success in your journey and the things you're growing today. And I'm excited to continue to watch your journey and see the success you'll continue to have and the lives you'll change with the stories that you get the opportunity to share.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you.